The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented.
Welcome to Wonderfully Made. My name is Dr. George Guthrie, Medical Director of the Lifestyle Center of America. When the doctor says you have cancer, often someone's mind just goes blank. It's the scariest thing that could happen because often there is no cure. And while science is making progress in that area, wouldn't it be good to avoid it altogether? That's what we're here to talk about today. With me is Tim Arnott, staff physician at Lifestyle Center of America.
Hi, George.
Oh, Tim.
Good to be here.
It is. It is. American Cancer Society has estimated that 1/3 of cancers can be prevented by changing the diet. And if people quit smoking, you could stop another third of them. That would be a total of 2/3 of the cancers that afflict us in this country actually gone. Boy, that would be good news, wouldn't it?
Incredible. Almost 70% reduction in cancer incidence in this country just by moving our diet in the right direction and leaving off cigarette smoking. This is powerful information, and fortunately there are bodies of scientists out there that are looking for clues in the diet, in the lifestyle, that can help us to avoid this #2 killer, cancer. And so we're going to be looking during this program at some of the exciting findings of the American Institute for Cancer Research and the World Cancer Research Fund. And we're going to be looking at a number of different cancers that are common to Americans and just finding out what is the amount that we could reduce those cancers if we changed our lifestyle.
Well, I guess right up there at the top is this thing that they call lung cancer.
Yes, lung cancer, of course, is mostly a smoker's disease, and they've taken for granted in this review of the diet and exercise literature that if you quit smoking, you'll largely avoid lung cancer. But they also wanted to see what else individuals could do. And so Dr. Potter, chair of the expert panel of diet and the cancer project there at the American Institute of Cancer Research, has found, he and his colleagues, that if you increase to a large extent the intake of fruits and vegetables, that smokers and non-smokers, by the way, could both lower their risk of lung cancer about 20 to 33%. Now, of course, those two groups have greatly different risks of lung cancer, but even those who don't smoke can lower their risk of lung cancer. There's a few people that get it from breathing, of course, secondhand cigarette smoke, from breathing polluted air, but they could still lower their risk of lung cancer about 20 to 33%. And smokers as well, if they adopt a diet high in fruits and vegetables.
What is it about the fruits and vegetables that would protect against lung cancer? Do we have any idea?
Well, the tobacco smoke has 4,000 plus chemicals, and many of these are, of course, cancer-causing, carcinogens, and others create oxidative damage, chemical damage, if you will. And if you can take in antioxidants in the fruits and vegetables, they will actually neutralize some of those damaging chemicals in the tobacco smoke and thus lower your risk of lung cancer. And for those who don't smoke but breathe polluted air or breathe secondhand smoke, the fruits and vegetables, the antioxidants in those can actually sweep away some of these free radicals, some of these dangerous chemicals in the pollution or in the secondhand cigarette smoke, protecting your DNA from damage, and that means protection to at least some degree against cancer.
Of course, lung cancer is one of those cancers that's really hard to find until it's too late as well. It's hard to screen for it early. Once it's there, it's almost always fatal. So lots of fruits and vegetables to protect, whether you're a smoker or not.
Absolutely.
Of course, quit smoking.
Absolutely.
That's the first thing to do.
That's taken for granted.
That's taken for granted. Well, what about stomach cancer? It's not as common, but yet it does happen.
Yeah, Dr. Potter and his colleagues report that stomach cancer can also be reduced by a change in lifestyle. In fact, they report a 66 to 75% reduction in stomach cancer by, again, adopting a diet rich in fruits and vegetables and a diet low in salt and in salty foods. These are very important principles if you want to lower your risk of stomach cancer. High fruit and vegetable diet, stay away from salty foods, and stay away from as much salt as you possibly can. 66
to 75% reduction just from the dietary component. So stomach cancer is even more sensitive to what we eat, and I suppose that would make sense because the food that we eat goes into our stomach. If there's something that's irritating or causing problems, irritating, causing problems in the DNA, that stomach cancer is more likely to come. Well, I guess those fruits and vegetables protect in local areas too, don't they?
I'll tell you what, there's a theme that's running through this program, and I think you're going to pick it up as we go along.
Fruits and vegetables.
Oh, you got it.
I didn't let the secret out. Okay. Well, breast cancer is also quite common. Is there any protection from breast cancer from diet?
Yes, Dr. Potter also reports that there is protection against breast cancer, especially if you get started early. If you get started around the age of puberty and get on a good lifestyle, you could actually, their reports show, lower the risk of breast cancer about 33 to 50%. So you could cut your risk potentially by a third or up to 1/2. Now, what do you need to do? Well, you need to eat a much more plant-based diet. You want to stay away from alcohol, and you want to maintain an optimal weight, because if your weight goes up, not only does insulin go up, which can increase the risk of cancer, but your estrogen level will go up, which can also push your breast cells toward increased risk of cancer transformation. And then you want to do regular physical exercise. So these are the important things to think about if you're a young woman, or even if you're older. Even if you don't get started at puberty, if you get started later on in life, there is still protection, but probably not as much as 33 to 50%. So again, what do you want to do? A plant-based diet, stay away from alcohol, and adopt an exercise program, and keep your weight from creeping up as you get older. How do you do that? How would you keep your weight from creeping up as you get older?
Well, I suppose exercise regularly and eat a plant-based diet.
Okay, that sounds good. George, is there anything else that we should know, that we should share with our listeners if they're trying to lower their risk of breast cancer?
Well, you know, one thing of the things that can be done is actually start in childhood, because if a child is on a plant-based diet, they tend to go through puberty later in life. Instead of 9, 10, or 11, maybe as late as 13, 15, 16 in some Oriental countries. And this significantly decreases the risk of breast cancer later in life. So that's good news.
All right. So if you want to help your child or grandchild to avoid breast cancer and other female cancers, put them on a diet that has the right amount of protein, not too much protein, and they'll actually go into puberty about 2, 3, 4 years later, and that means protection against female cancers, including breast cancer.
Well, Tim, what about colon cancer? That's a real common one these days.
Now, Dr. Potter and, again, his colleagues at the American Institute of Cancer Research found that if you change your lifestyle, you can lower your risk of colon cancer 60 to 75%. Now, what do you need to do? You need to adopt a diet that's rich in vegetables, that's low in meat, and get regular exercise. And there's one final thing: stay away from alcohol. So a plant-based diet, rich in vegetables, moving away from the meats, especially the red meats, adopting an exercise program, and staying away from alcohol. 60 to 75% reduction in colon cancer. That's remarkable.
It is, and I suppose, again, it makes sense that colon cancer would be more responsive to what we eat because it's what's managing our food as it goes through our bodies. Now, I noticed something different about colon cancer from some of the others. You said we need to decrease red meat. Is there something in red meat that might make it more likely for us to have cancer?
Well, researchers believe there's a number of things, and probably the first thing is that there is no fiber in meat. There is also a lot of saturated fat, and that saturated fat can do a number of things, but one of the things that it can do is to increase insulin resistance. That can increase insulin levels. Your weight is usually higher if you're eating a lot of red meat, and so you have more insulin in the blood, greater propensity for cancer development to spread and to become a problem. But probably some of the other things are how the meat is cooked. Mm-hmm. And if you take that meat and you broil it, the fats in that meat, especially the red meats, but all of the animal flesh foods, if you take them and broil them, the fats will fall down into the flame and become superheated and change into carcinogenic substances, cancer-promoting substances that fill the smoke and then coat the bottom of the meat patty or the other meat that's being charbroiled. These are highly statistically related to the development of cancer. And also cured meats and processed meats are actually the worst offender when it comes to promoting risk of cancer.
Now, I suppose with a very low fiber diet that the transit time would be diminished significantly, would take increase significantly. It would take longer for food to get from one end to the other, longer for there would be a greater time for the carcinogens to be in contact with the colon. So I'll bet fiber also comes into this in a real important way.
Fiber is very important, and Dr. Bingham and his colleagues at the EPIC study, this is the European Prospective Investigation into Cancer. This is 500,000 individuals being studied in 12 countries in Europe, and what they found was those individuals eating the most fiber had a 40% lower risk of colon cancer. And so a significant reduction in, again, this most common cancer of male and female non-smokers just by eating the most fiber. Where do you find fiber? Well, George, where would you find fiber?
In whole plant foods. The way God packaged them, they have the fiber mixed right in with them.
The only foods that have fiber are beans, whole grains, fruits, vegetables, nuts and seeds. So when they say individuals are eating more fiber than anyone else, what they're saying is these individuals are eating more beans, whole grains, fruits, vegetables, nuts and seeds than anyone else, and they're at 40% lower risk of colon cancer.
Well, we've heard about stomach cancer, we've heard about colon cancer. Anywhere along the GI tract, I suppose there could be a change, especially with the food that we eat. What about the mouth and oral pharynx?
Well, certainly if you want to avoid mouth and oral pharynx and swallowing tube, if you will, esophagus cancer, you want to stay away from tobacco, chewing tobacco, and also smoking. But what this area of research, the American Institute for Cancer Research, we're looking at is what else can be done. And sure enough, individuals who are eating a diet high in fruits and vegetables, and those individuals staying away from alcohol, they have 33 to 50% lower risk of cancers of the mouth, cancers of the back of the throat. And so there is something that we can do to lower our risk of cancer to help prevent this devastating condition.
Well, that's good news again. Now I'm thinking of other cancers in the body. What about the liver cancers?
Well, Dr. Potter and his colleagues again found that a 33 to 66% reduction in liver cancer could be achieved if you stay away from two toxins to the liver. Alcohol, of course, is one of them. The other one is a contaminant of some foods, aflatoxin. And so these two things you best want to stay away from. And some of the things that you can do is to make sure that the foods that you eat are from places of the world where they don't have a lot of the decaying and rotting process, where things come fresh from the field, fresh from the orchard, fresh from the garden. Also make sure that what you do take into your body has been washed thoroughly. And finally, you want to make sure that you're careful to refrigerate these foods and to peel those things that can be peeled, because a lot of the toxins lie on the surface, and oftentimes you can wash that off or peel it off.
Of interest here is the truth that aflatoxin is the most toxic cancer-producing agent that we know of. So it really needs to be avoided. It's commonly found on nuts, peanuts in particular, that have been, instead of dried, they've actually had some water attached or in contact with them, and that water allows this mold to grow aflatoxin. Now, fortunately, it can be identified if one looks at the peanuts underneath a black light with the other white lights out, and then it will fluoresce. So one could actually identify it. I worry a little bit about some people who make their own peanut butter by getting their own peanuts or almonds. If they're not kept stored in a very dry place, they may actually grow the organisms that would cause or that would create aflatoxin and could lead to liver cancer.
So would you recommend that we keep our nuts in the freezer or in the refrigerator?
Certainly dry, and in the refrigerator they would be more stable. That's correct.
All right. So again, wonderful information about how to lower your risk of cancer. Well, Dr. Potter and his associates there at the American Institute of Cancer Research have given us a lot of hope, a lot of information about how we can lower our risk of a number of cancers. Well, let's take a moment and look at the summary information from the American Institute of Cancer Research about how we can lower our risk of cancer, as they looked at thousands and thousands of studies relating diet to cancer, relating exercise and lifestyle to cancer. This group came up with some fascinating recommendations. You may want to get a pencil or pen and jot these down. Hopefully you're recording the program so you can watch it later, because these are very, very valuable pieces of information about those who want to avoid cancer. Number one is, of course, that you want to adopt a plant-based diet. George, that term may be a little confusing to some individuals. What are we really talking about?
Well, a plant-based diet would be one where people ate lots of and only whole foods. Now, whole foods can be prepared in a variety of tasteful ways. That doesn't mean that one would, for example, eat dried beans. Those can be cooked and seasoned nicely. It doesn't mean that you would eat just simple rice, for example. One might have tomatoes and other wonderful flavors with them. Doesn't mean that you don't cook, but that you focus on the plants.
So what you're basically saying, George, is try to avoid those packages, those processed, those prepared, those engineered foods where they remove much of the beneficial parts of the plant and they add things that you really never wanted in the first place, such as corn syrup, partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, salt, and enriched wheat flour. So what we're recommending, what they're recommending, I should say, is a diet of beans, whole grains, fruits, vegetables, nuts and seeds. That diet sounds very familiar. How would we how would we describe that diet from the owner's manual point of view?
Well, I guess it's very close to the original diet that God gave back in the Garden of Eden.
It's fascinating, isn't it, that the diet that the American Institute of Cancer Research is recommending for those who want to avoid cancer is none other than the diet that the Creator gave to man in the very beginning. Well, what's something else that we can do? Well, actually, the next recommendation is 5 fruits and vegetables every day. Why are they recommending 5? Because, frankly, most Americans get 3 or fewer servings of fruits and vegetables every day. And quite frankly, some of those vegetables are a little suspicious. The potato family, do most people get the spud?
You're talking about French fries, aren't you? Not exactly a real good choice for a vegetable.
Not exactly the best vegetable. French fries and potato chips aren't quite exactly what's being recommended here. But fruits and vegetables, 5 servings a day. And you just might know that the Food Guide Pyramid recommends a maximum of 9 servings of fruits and vegetables every day, and frankly, that would probably be even better.
Well, would I be out of place if I tried to eat 5 fruits or vegetables for each meal?
Well, that is a powerful thing. If you think about it, 5 fruits and vegetable servings at each meal. Now, you don't have to mix those. We would probably encourage you to eat the fruits at one meal, the vegetables at another meal, perhaps. But one thing to remember, we're talking about half-cup servings. And so 5 half-cup servings, that's just 2½ cups. And most individuals can eat 4 cups at a meal. So that's just a little bit more than half of your meal. What a powerful idea, George. Those who want to avoid cancer, about half your meal, fruits or vegetables, or even both if your stomach can handle it. Some people's can. Well, let's look at the... Go ahead, George.
Well, I was just going to point out, when I chew down on a stalk of broccoli, I like to think of the phytonutrients that are actually headed down into my body to protect me against cancer and disease.
That's right, and that brings up a good point. When you're eating these wonderful fruits and vegetables, you want to chew them thoroughly in order to get all of the benefits possible. Take your time, savor. Actually, we're told that you can get as much nourishment in a large amount of food as in a small amount, or excuse me, I should say that another way. You can get as much nourishment in a small amount as you would in a larger amount if you chew it thoroughly. This is a very important principle. The next recommendation is 7 or more servings of whole grains every day. We're talking about 100% whole wheat bread, whole grain pasta, brown rice, oats, whole oats for breakfast, steamed millets, steamed rye, steamed different grains like wild rice, long grain rice, short grain rice, but whole rice, brown rice. These whole grains can help protect against cancer.
You think too much sugar might be a problem?
Well, that's what they found out, George, in these studies. They found out that individuals with the lowest risk of cancer eat the least refined and processed sugar. You should know that sugar reduces the ability of the white blood cell to do its job, to protect you. And the white blood cells not only protect you from infection, they protect you against cancer. So you want them as strong as possible. And to keep them strong, avoid refined sugar. Frankly, most refined sugar isn't just sitting there on the counter, nice and white, saying, "Eat me." It's largely hidden. What's one of the most popular sources of refined sugar, often called corn syrup, high fructose?
Are you talking about the soda pops?
Exactly.
I know they have a lot of the high fructose corn syrup.
Yes, we don't like to use the word sugar anymore. We use high fructose corn syrup, but the effect is very much the same. And so choose whole foods if you want to lower your risk of cancer.
I'll bet that Dr. Potter had some things to say about meat. We've already reviewed some of them. How did he summarize? Was meat good to have?
Well, actually, this recommendation is that we avoid meat, that we use it as little of it as possible, especially the red meats. And so, frankly, what they found is that individuals that eat the most meat have the most cancer. Those who eat the least meat, the least cancer. So they're not recommending that meat really be added to the diet. There's no evidence that adding meat to the diet lowers the risk of cancer. On the contrary, adding more and more plants, especially vegetables and fruits, will indeed lower the risk.
Are there any other recommendations?
Lowering the risk of fat in the diet. Now, this may seem a little bit tedious, but they found that those individuals eating about 15% of their calories from fat or less had the lowest risk of cancer. Well, you say, well, I'm really not into using a calculator at my meal to figure out how much fat is in there. The good news is you don't have to. In fact, those foods, beans, whole grains, fruits, and vegetables, if you look at all of them, the average fat content of those foods is less than 10%. So you have to add nuts and seeds to get it up to 15%. And so it's beautiful. All you have to do is eat the Creator's food, His plant food, and your diet will essentially be 15% fat or even less. But the problem is when we add visible fats in large amounts, that's when we can really push the fat content of the diet upward. And according to this research, increase the risk of cancer.
Of course, the average American is eating somewhere up around, what, 40%, maybe down to 35 now. But it's a significant load. And so decreasing it significantly brings benefit. Well, that's good.
I think we should point out that even the American Cancer Society diet is about 29% fat. You've probably heard in the news a lot of people talking about these low-fat diets. Atkins' diet compared to the low-fat diet. That diet they're calling low-fat is about 29% fat. And this recommendation is about half that, 15%, and that's what you'll get if you eat the Creator's plants just as they come from nature and use visible oils in a minimal amount, which is, by the way, the next recommendation, avoiding a lot of the processed oil, which apparently can increase the risk of cancer. Reducing the salt intake is also important, about a teaspoon or less a day, and make sure you refrigerate those leftovers immediately. Avoid the additives and residues. Peel fruits and vegetables when possible, and avoid broiling your food. Avoid alcohol, tobacco, and by the way, if you want to avoid cancer, make sure that smoking is also not in your future. George, any final thoughts as we think about the reduction of cancer and what we can do about it?
Well, cancer is such a deadly disease, and it's so scary when it comes. It makes sense to prevent it. Yes, do the screening that should be done, but work to prevent the cancer by eating the diet that God has planned for us. We are fearfully and wonderfully made.